Hey everyone, welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Free from the Inside Out, an introduction to the inner work. I'm Dr. Susan Pierce Thompson, and I'm joined today by the fabulous Miss Molly Larkin
Hi,
and,
everybody.
and Benjamin, whom we're going to introduce later, Benjamin Schaefer. And I'm going to welcome a few people in the chat thread. It's going so fast, and there's a lot of people here live on the line, a lot of people, but from Utah and British Columbia and Albany and Des Moines, Iowa, Greece, New York, which is actually right near me. Greece is actually kind of a suburb of Rochester. So, hey there, Julie. Janae from Fort Collins, Colorado. Rosie from England. Hey, Rosie. Pat from Connecticut. We've got Aurora, Illinois, St. Lucie, Florida. Lots of folks from Florida, Michigan, more people from British Columbia, Maryland, Sacramento, California's in the house. Long Beach is in the house. Istanbul. Basak from Istanbul, welcome. And Sonia from Slovenia. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We've got Ontario in the house. More from the UK, Vegas, Stamford, Connecticut. Oh, it's just a big party. Missouri, Prince Edward Island, Canada, the Netherlands. Hey, Amsterdam, Suzanne from Amsterdam. We've got Oslo, Norway in the house. I'm going to be there in a week. I hope I get to meet you. I can't wait to go to Oslo. We got Brooklyn, one of my favorite places. Why does it say live streaming offline? That's a good question. It shouldn't. We should totally be online. I don't know why it would say that. Vivian from Ottawa. Julie says, let's rock. All right, let's do it. So when we do that, what I do is I mute the chat thread. So here we go. I'm going to mute the chat thread. One of the things I teach in my Bright Line Mind course, which is all about positive psychology, is that when we multitask, not only are we less cognitively capable, like we're less efficient, essentially, but we also kill our enjoyment. Our happiness levels in terms of the experience we're having tank. So I'm always careful to mute the chat thread or stop the chat thread when I do a webinar like this, just during the meat of the actual presentation, because otherwise the chat thread is really seductive, right? Like I love you guys and I want to see who's in there and what they're saying. So Robin from South Africa is here. See, it's really like, so in order to actually have a good time with you and in order to facilitate you having a good time here, I mute that so we can just be present together. So we're here to talk about the inner work. And in a second, I'm going to introduce Molly. But Molly, right now, I'm going to ask you to mute yourself and mute your video because I'm hearing a lot of feedback in the audio. Thanks. That's so much better. Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about the inner work. And this is just a topic that's really near and dear to my heart because I've had to do so much of it. I guess we all come to adulthood, in whatever way we do, but I came to adulthood pretty broken. I came to adulthood, dysfunctional. If you've heard my story, like I was a drug addict as a teenager. So I burned through my teenage years, dropped out of high school, basically demonstrated to myself over and over again that I couldn't face life. And, at the age of 20, basically started going to a 12-step program and built my life from there. And I sort of feel like everything that I am, everything that I have, everything that I'm able to do, all the relationships that I'm able to have, they're all a direct outcropping of me being willing to show up for some really deep, profound inner work. And I think at first I did that through the 12 steps. And then I needed some therapy in the mix. I'd already been to therapy like since 7th grade. They knew something was up with me. So they were sending me to therapy from 7th grade on. But, so there was therapy in the mix. There was a lot of the 12 steps. I worked the 12 steps in multiple different programs. There's drugs and alcohol, and then there was food, and then there was sex. And I was working the 12 steps in lots of different ways. And then I found that there were certain times where I needed something beyond the 12 steps. And I started doing Byron Katie's The Work. And I started, went back to more therapy and things like that. And when I started Bright Line Eating, I knew that we would need to offer some form of the inner work because you can't take people's food away from them, right? And say, oh, you're not eating sugar and flour anymore. And you're not going to eat in between meals either. and then expect that to go well if they don't have a whole bunch of new tools that they never had before in terms of like, well, then what do I lean on, right? Like that food, as much as it was killing us, it was working to provide a little numbness, a little comfort, a little release, a little go-to, like just a little checkout, a little, the food filled a role, even if it was just cotton stuffed into a hole, you know what I mean? It was like, it was providing some kind of support there, right? And you take that away, and then it's like, well, so I knew we needed to provide a way to do the inner work. And I also knew that the 12 steps weren't going to be it. And I knew that because I guess for one main reason, which is that the 12 steps rely heavily on an explicit God concept. And I knew that a lot of people came to Bright Line Eating, not, the majority of people, but some fraction of people came to Bright Line Eating because the God concept thing and 12-step programs wasn't for them, and so I knew that we would need to provide a way to do the inner work that was a little bit more, faith neutral. And in Bright Line Eating, I think we straddle that line really well of providing space for people who want to have their own religious or spiritual stuff woven in, and people who really don't. It's not that hard actually to create space where people can do whatever they want to do with that. So I spent some time just offering Bright Line Eating boot camps, and then we had like more and more graduates of the Bright Line Eating boot camp clamoring for some sort of inner work course. And I approached Molly to help me with that. And I thought of Molly because, and Molly, come on back up here, sweetie. I want to, yeah. So, let's see here. I don't know. Okay. Well, Benjamin's there too, but we're going to introduce him later. But I just want to talk about Molly for a second. Molly and I have known each other for years, and Molly and I got closest for the first time. Like, we're closer now, but like for the first time we got closest when I left my 12-step food program for a little bit and decided I was going to try to do competent, intuitive eating for my food. After years and years and years of not eating sugar or flour, I decided that I was going to try to just be a normal eater and like eat mindfully and stuff. And it wasn't going very well. And I was kind of spinning out over it. And a mutual friend of ours, because Molly and I both have been doing the inner work for a long time, so we run in the same circles. We have a lot of overlapping friends and stuff. And our mutual friend Amy was like, "You got to call Molly. Like, she's someone you need to talk to, because she has a food thing too, but she's not spinning out like you are. I'll tell you that much right now." And so I called Molly, and Molly provided a way for me to she was just there for me. First of all, she just held amazing space. That's the thing about Molly, is she just holds amazing space. And whether she's in a great place or not doesn't seem to matter. She walks into a room and it's a feeling of coming home. She's like my home, like almost like, I mean, Molly, not like you're like a grandma, but like some people's grandma, I think, feels like that. You know what I mean? Like they have this warm, like a New Orleans grandma, you know what I mean? Where you just walk into her home and it's like, "Oh baby, come on home." Like you're just like home. So I remember I was driving and it was dark and it was winter and I was calling you and you were like, you can be okay even here, Suze. Like, I get that the food feels awful right now, but you can find, your center is still here right now. Just think into that. And Molly guided me back into myself, even when my food was awry, which for me, in my worldview at the time, meant that like everything was bad, and I never forgot that. And she and I got a lot closer after that. And Molly is the only person actually that I personally know who had a wicked, wicked food issue and who basically found her way through that through the inner work, like basically just dug into herself. My personal solution for my food is from the outside in. I need bright lines on the outside. Molly did it a different way. She went deep inside and found her structure from the inside, which ultimately leads to just about the same place, but it's actually a very different approach. And And so because of that, like the inner work is primary for Molly. Like that's her bread and butter. Pardon the phrase, bad expression. So Molly and there was this great moment in our journey where Molly's an RN. She was working as a nurse, and psychiatric nurse working in the field, and she'd gone on to get a life coach certification. So now she's a certified life coach, and she's like feeling called to helping people in a much bigger way than her nursing career was affording her. And she saw me doing this bright line eating thing, and she saw it like kind of taking off. I mean, I think a lot of the people in my life, my friends, when bright line eating started taking off, they're like, what's going on with Susan over there? And so she called me up and she's like, Suze, can we have dinner? Like, I want to pick your brain a little, because I feel like I have got something in me, kind of like you do. And I want to help people like you're helping people. And I want to know how you've done it. And so we sat down for dinner one night in Rochester at this Ethiopian restaurant, this vegan Ethiopian restaurant that we love. And we're eating our sauteed greens. It was just a delicious dinner. And I shared with her, how I did it and, how I reached people. And there was like a little seed planted at that dinner. It didn't come to be a tree right then, but it was this sense of like, we're sisters on this journey. Like we need to help people kind of in the same way. And it was a little later that I realized I needed to offer an inner work course. And it was just really clear that Molly was the one to kind of come on board and help with that. So then I reached out to Molly, and it was like right at the exact moment that she was like, you should tell that story, Molly. Like, right. I reached out to you. Right. And I'm going to let you take it from here. I want to introduce Molly Larkin. She's one of the most special people on this planet. And, to me, that's my assessment. And yeah, so Molly, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and a little bit about how you came to do this, a little bit about your food story, and yeah, maybe a little bit about how we kind of partnered up.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks. And hey, everybody. It's so nice to be here with you. Thanks for taking this little time out of your Saturday to hang out with us and talk about the inner work and what it means to be free from the inside out. My experience in a nutshell is that, like so many of you, I found myself really badly lost, in that dark forest that is addiction, compulsive behavior. Mine took the form of a lot of control with food, which led to a really wicked case of bulimia. And then later, lots of other addictions and compulsions, primarily drugs and alcohol, and all of it, recognizing, looking back, that the main compulsion was to escape myself, to escape the present moment. And like so many people I know who struggle in this way, I was really, I could figure a lot of things out in my mind. I have a clever and quick mind. And so as soon as I recognized actually that I had a problem, actually the first time that I binged and purged, I remember being like, oh my gosh, this is bulimia. Like, I called my mom and I told her what was going on with me. And I thought, okay, I'm going to get some therapy, and then I'm just going to get out of this. Like, I'm going to figure my way out of this. And well, that skill of like kind of coming up with solutions to my problems had served me well in many areas. What happened for me was that I couldn't figure my way out of it to save my life. And the harder I tried, in fact, to look for something that would work to fix this, to save myself, to get out, the deeper I dug myself in. And so I suffered badly, for about a decade, a little over a decade. And really, I often say about that time that it was like I lived my life around the edges of this relationship that I had with food and compulsive behavior. And there was a tremendous amount of shame and self-loathing and a tremendous sense of living way outside of my own experience. And I did what made sense to me at the time. And I have a lot of compassion looking back. I did this thing. I looked everywhere. I looked for the right therapist. I looked for the right, I've always been a seeker, a person who wanted the truth. So I looked for the right meditation practice or the right spiritual teachings or, the right relationships, the right. I tried so hard to get it, to do it right. But really, I didn't know that there was a way through. I only knew that I needed to get out. And again, the more I tried, the deeper I went in. So, I never want to give the impression that like one day I just woke up and like everything was great. This path for me has never looked the way I expected it to look or wanted it to look. But what happened for me, the grace that happened was that I recognized at some point that like no one was coming to kind of like save me or give me the magic thing. And that somehow I was going to have to turn in. I was going to have to find a way to stop running from myself. Because even the way that I approached recovery was all my own ideas. It was just me applying more of my own thinking to this problem. And so what I learned over time and with a lot of support was to come back here to learn what it was like to inhabit my own experience moment by moment. And that sounds beautiful and spiritual. And the truth is that so often it felt awful and difficult. And then sometimes amazing. What I learned is that real healing asks for an unconditional, loving presence for whatever arises. So my desire to like get rid of a behavior or a part of myself or part of my experience, while it was really natural, it wasn't going to, I couldn't, it could only take me so far. And by being held by people and in communities where there was that sense of wherever I am, whatever's going on inside me, like there's room for it. I started to grow my capacity to be with myself. I started to drop this idea that my recovery or my life was a giant self-improvement project. Because that's really how I approached it. I thought that I was so damaged and so far gone and so confused and mixed up and lost and hopeless, and bad ultimately too. I felt so much shame about who I was. And so as a result of that, I lived in this way where I was, there was me in the moment, but I was living, it was always held up next to this kind of ghost image of myself and what I would be like if I was more spiritual, or if I was not bulimic, or if I was, a different kind of mother, or if I was partnered, or if I didn't have the parents right? Like, in other words, there was no one home. There was no one home. So recovery for me, like recovery from my eating disorder and my addictive behaviors, but also just like in life in general, has been this process of continually coming back home, doing this. I have a teacher who calls it the U-turn, Y-O-U. Like when I feel this desire to get out, to fix, to control, to move away, to recognize that that's a call back home. And in that way, what I believe, and so what I offer to others, is that whatever it is that feels like the biggest roadblock or the biggest struggle or the biggest shame, it really is an invitation to remember our wholeness. It doesn't feel like that. It often, is buried under so many layers, and we need a lot of support to recognize it as such. But it's my deep belief that that's what any challenge can be, is an opportunity to come back home. And so, so when Susan called me about coming to work for Bright Line Eating, I had been starting my own coaching practice on the side while working full-time as a psych nurse, as Susan mentioned. And I had just been asking for some clear direction, like just in the week before, that had been my prayer. Like, okay, give me some clear direction, like really clear direction. I know I feel this call to be of service in this particular way. And I also know that when I set off with my mind and my thinking and my plan, things generally don't go well. So I've learned to ask for direction. And in the way that sometimes happens, it was one of those times when it came very quickly and very clearly, where Susan, I remember waking up to a text one morning of her saying, "Hey, let's get together. I have an idea." So we'll talk more about the program that we've put together, about the inner work. But what I want to say is that I think part of what makes this program different from a lot of what is out there, and this might be disappointing to some of you, at one point in my life, it would have been disappointing to me to hear, but is that this is not a self-improvement program. And, most of us are really accustomed to working harder and pushing and fixing and correcting and striving and improving. And that's okay. It does work in some areas, and you'll get a lot of validation socially for doing that. But my experience is that when we relate to ourselves and our lives as a problem to be solved, that's all we see. And we live in our thinking, for one thing, from the neck up. And we also live constantly comparing ourselves to this more perfect version of ourselves. And what's devastating about that is that we miss our lives. We can miss years of our life in that way. And I think most of you probably feel what I'm talking about when I say that. So we'll talk more about the details of this course and what I mean when I say that it's not a self-improvement course. But I'm going to turn it over to Susan in a second, because I know she promised you that she would share this question that I ask in the program that's really changed my life. And we're sharing it here with you because we think it really illustrates what's different about this program, or rather, like, it typifies this approach. Like, you're not a problem to be solved. That's not what we're here to do. We're not here to aggressively fix ourselves, because the reality is that there's nothing like that. Your true nature is goodness. So the reality is that the work we do is to uncover that, to remove what stands in the way of our experience of the present moment. So Susan, I'm going to turn it to you.
Perfect, Ma. Thank you. Yeah, so I promised to share with you the one question. And I will say that when Molly first told me, as we were developing Bright Line Healing together, and she said, "Well, it's not a self-improvement course," it agitated me that she said that. I was like, in my head, I was like, what do you mean it's not a self-improvement course? That's exactly what it is. Like, we're so going to help people. And she's like, no, it's really not a self-improvement course. And I think it's my inner work Molly's taken the inner work to a depth that I think only lately, since doing Bright Line Healing, have I taken it to. I so get it now. But I didn't get it for like, I'm talking folks like a year. Like she would say, you're not a problem to be solved. This isn't a self-improvement course. And I was like, don't tell me that. Like I'm working on this and it's working. And so anyway, in the course Bright Line Healing, one of the things that Molly has us do is to take a sticky note and write a question on it. And I've got it right here. It's the one thing on my wall. I'm just saying right here, this is where I work primarily, right here at my laptop. This is our guest room, but we don't have guests that often. So this is primarily where I work. And I have one thing on the wall that I look at. And it's this pink sticky note that I wrote the first time I did Bright Line Healing, the first time we offered it. And of course, I just dropped the note underneath my desk. So hold on real quick. And here's what it says. Can you read that? Here, let me. I think the light is too bright. It says, what if nothing is wrong? What if, here, I'm going to see if I can turn this off. Okay, that's better. What if nothing is wrong? And I don't know if you're seeing that mirror image or right, because to me it looks mirror image. So I don't know if you're seeing it right. But anyway, that's what it says. What if nothing is wrong? I challenge you to put that on your wall and just look at it every now and then and just see how in any given moment, how that hits you and how it relates. What if nothing is wrong? Right now, I've got two big things that I think are wrong with my life. What if they're not? What if they're exactly the way they're supposed to be at this moment? What if they're working their way out right now in ways I can't even fathom? What if nothing is wrong? It's a really powerful question. And I do think it typifies what's different about this approach to the inner work. Molly takes a stand for our wholeness, my wholeness, your wholeness, in a way that I think is really in line with deep spiritual truth. You know, there's an analogy that I like, which is, you know, on a cloudy day, the splendor of the sun is not really diminished, right? The sun's doing just fine. The clouds are not fundamentally hurting the sun at all, right? And like you and I are the sun, and the clouds of life, they come and go. Fundamentally, nothing is wrong with the sun. I don't care how gray and how, I mean, even at midnight, right? Sun is still doing fine. And I'm not saying that a dark night isn't scary. I'm just saying that coming to deeply grasp that our wholeness remains all through that. It's a profound paradigm shift. And yeah, so do you see from that perspective how thinking of any approach to the inner work that's like a self-improvement project, that we're going to now make the sun better. We're going to work on that sun. We're going to get it to shine brighter. We're going to get it to do its job better. We're going to get it to, you know, be hotter. Like, that's not it, right? You know, maybe some different tools for dealing with inclement weather that fundamentally have nothing to do with the sun and its splendor or its brightness or its beauty. You know, tools for inclement weather are a very good idea. As the Finns say, there's no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate clothing, right? Like if the weather's feeling bad, you just need some different clothing. I love that. There's no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate clothing. So, you know, in Bright Line Healing, we work on, you know, getting a better wardrobe for bad weather. We're not trying to fix the sun. So I'm curious, Mal, because it's your question, right? And you're the one who taught me, like, what does this question mean to you? What if nothing is wrong?
Yeah, for me, that question, what it does is scramble my thinking for a second. So it drops me out of, you know, when we're identified with our mind, and I'll talk more about that in a second. What the mind's really good at is identifying and solving problems. And Susan will can easily talk about that. You know, from an evolutionary perspective, it makes so much sense that we're designed to have this negativity bias where we're scanning for problems, and then we want to solve them. That works really well for certain situations, right? Like it works if we have like a fire to put out or something like that. But what it leads to, if we're not dropping in regularly to a different kind of experience beyond just the thinking mind, is a lot of hypervigilance and exhaustion. And confusion too, because it's that thing, like Einstein said, you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. So it's like we block the channel. There's no fresh creative thinking available. And I think the question, what if nothing's wrong? It's kind of like a breath of fresh air. It's like, well, what if? And for me, I can see a lot of evidence of times when I've been certain, like really certain that something was really wrong, something was really bad. And so following my logical mind, I did a lot of work to try to fix that. And all it did was cement the problem in place. What if nothing's wrong and there is just some temporary weather passing through? Like what if nothing's wrong and it kind of clears up on its own? Or what if nothing's wrong allows me to respond creatively rather than reacting to a problem with that mind that is, wired for danger, So what if nothing's wrong doesn't leave me passive and, flopping around on the couch all day. It's more like a creative and responsive stance toward life.
Beautiful. I just had to laugh because I had a fire to put out the last time we did this webinar. We did this webinar on Thursday, and I always like candles for these webinars because I just feel like candlelight is by far the most beautiful light, right? So I've got a couple candles here, and I had this one over here, and my stack of like notes and papers and stuff right on top of the printer right over here with the corner sticking out, and I set them on fire during the live stream. So Molly and I are talking, and I'm like, I think there's smoke over there, but then I just think it's the candle. And then it was like, no, there's actually a little bonfire in my corner, and I'm like putting it out anyway. So yeah, I'm sure that that's where that specific example came from in Molly's subconscious mind. It bubbled up. If you have a fire, then maybe there is something wrong.
Although you handled that very gracefully and calmly.
Oh, we punt, baby. We punt. What if
I just want to say one more thing on that subject, which is that when I first was coming to you and saying, well, this isn't a self-improvement course, first you were like, well, yeah, it is. But then you were like, all right, well, maybe you're right, but we cannot tell them that.
Holly did say that. Don't put that in the marketing.
Do not say that.
I want to be fit.
But the reason I bring it up is because I think that for a lot of people, what I've noticed is it's such a relief. Like we're exhausted of trying to improve ourselves,
right? And
trying to apply the next thing and the next course and the next strategy. And again, it's not that tools and strategies don't have their place. They're great, like the clothes, like umbrellas, But I think that as a whole, we're pretty tired.
Balance. Yeah, our tribe for sure. And I think, modern humans. Yeah. I mean, this society and our whole approach to life in general, it's pretty exhausting. And then you just throw one more app on top of that, a little more technology, and like, forget about it. You know what I mean? Like, how much can I be going, trying to hack it all, like, yeah, totally. Oh, so we developed a process basically and a framework, and we want to share that framework with you because whether you decide to do Bright Line Healing with us or not, we actually have the totally gutsy assertion that this is like the framework for all inner work, essentially. Like, because Molly, I threw you on the spot last time. Share with them, because you've done more forms of the inner work than I have. Dalai Lama and Fourfold. Like, what are all the? Because there's a lot of them, right? Like you've done a lot of fourfold this and sevenfold that. And like, there's a lot of them but I just want to illustrate for people, like we're pretty educated gals about that. I mean, I've done the 12 steps deeply. I've done Jungian analysis. I've done cognitive behavioral therapy. I've done classical psychoanalysis. I've done Byron Katie's The Work, and I've done the 4 agreements. Those are some of the ones that I've done. You've added some to that. You've done all those, right? And then some beyond that too. Wait, you're muted. Wait, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I didn't have my microphone on. I could certainly create a list that may or may not be impressive, but I don't even know if that's what most qualifies me to teach this.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've touched tons of things. Like right now, my work is really to go more deeply with a couple of my practices because this is my, this is where I'm called. Like I have practiced and played with all kinds of things, Course in Miracles, Vipassana meditation.
I didn't mention meditation. Do that.
Meditation. Yeah. Lots of Buddhist studies. Yeah. I studied a lot of Buddhist psychotherapy in my undergrad. But I really,
I actually know more about world religions than most people. Like, I became a Baha'i a while ago, and like Islam, Christianity, Judaism, like the main sort of Judeo-Christian religions, I've studied them pretty deeply. Not as much Buddhism and Hinduism, but yeah.
Yeah, lots of like, non-dual teachings and writings, but I think that that's interesting. I think all that stuff is interesting. And I think that but I think more kind of what qualifies us, if anything, to like have something to share is just our own experience of having suffered really, really deeply and having kind of come through that, which isn't to say that we don't touch suffering, but we don't live there.
No.
So, but it's interesting because we have all that, because we're both so interested in looking deep and we have all that wealth of resources between us. That's what we looked at when we were trying to discern, okay, so what's kind of like the bones of all of this?
Common thread about all of it. And we came up with, you can distill it down to 4 pillars. You can distill it down to 4 pillars. And we think that they're the foundation of inner work, in the same way that there's certain principles, like I would assert the golden rule is a foundational principle of religion. Like, show me a religion that doesn't have that in their scripture. They do. All of them, and phrased pretty similarly. So there are foundations to truth. And we think that these are the 4 pillars that are the foundation of inner work. So Mal, do you want to show people what we came up with so that people can
I'd love to.
Framework and if you don't agree, that's cool. You know what I mean? We just offer it as a framework. And whether you have something to add or subtract, I think it'll be helpful to see. So take it.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many paths, and this is more just one that's designed to really drawn to. So the 4 pillars. The first pillar is awareness. And we start with that by cultivating awareness in a really deliberate and couple specific ways. And as accustomed as we are, as I mentioned, to working hard, cultivating awareness often seems too simple and too basic. In reality, it's a radical practice to ground ourselves repeatedly in non-judgmental present moment awareness. And it's really awareness that creates space for change. Thich Nhat Hanh said, awareness is like the sun. When it shines on things, they're transformed. We have a strong tendency to mistake ourselves for that little voice in our mind that's always talking. And we experience life through the filter of our thinking. And we innocently mistake that for life itself. But when we think that our thoughts are objective reality, we live from the neck up. We live in this thought created reality, not realizing that it's thought created. We think it's just objective reality. And that has the effect of really disconnecting us from our inner aliveness, from being. And what I mean by that is it really disconnects us from life itself. So thinking in and of itself is no problem. If you're a meditator, you know that the goal of meditation is not to be free of all thinking. It's to cultivate awareness, to notice that you are not your thoughts. You are not your thinking. You're not the thinker either. The thoughts just come, but there's this awareness that's behind it. And this is a huge shift. It might sound like semantics if you haven't observed it very much in yourself, and we really get microscopic about it in Bright Line Healing. Because the shift from believing yourself to be your thoughts to identifying with the one who's aware of your thinking opens up all kinds of space and choice. When we're no longer identified with our thinking, we're no longer at the mercy of our minds. In other words, as soon as we see thought for what it is, we have a choice. So this is the shift that I'm talking about, where we move from seeing life and ourselves as problem to be solved to living in the spaciousness of that question, what if nothing's wrong? And from that place, we can access other forms of intelligence, including that of the heart and the gut, the body. And Susan actually will tell us about that from a scientific perspective. And following awareness and building on that, we come to pillar 2, which is surrender. So noticing that most of the time we're caught up in a story about life, our thoughts, rather than the experience of life. We live kind of disconnected from the present moment, which is so painful. And yet we all have an experience, we all have a memory of entering a state of flow. And this tends to be marked by loss of sense of time and full absorption in whatever you're doing. There's a sense of well-being and alert presence, relaxation. I mean, you can find it in things like gardening or dancing or writing or even in your work. And people often describe feeling like they get out of the way. Like personal thinking really slows down and they feel inspired toward creative action or even non-action as the situation calls for. And so that state of flow, that state of being entirely engaged in life, could also be described as surrender. And I love thinking of surrender as like a big yes to what is. Eckhart Tolle says it's like total non-resistance to whatever the present moment contains. And most of us don't live there most of the time. We don't trust life. And by the time we're adults, we have a lot of evidence to support the idea that life is not trustworthy, that if we don't make things happen or prevent bad things from happening, nothing good will come. I mean, this is basically the bedrock of our society, this idea that more is better. We believe in the myth of the individual, of every man for himself. Work harder, be successful. You're almost there. Keep striving, keep pushing. And as I mentioned before, is that what's tricky about this is that it will get you a lot of validation and approval. And you might be able to live this way and achieve a lot of the external markers of success. A lot of the people I work with are in this position. But here's the thing. What you practice on the way to success is what you will have when you get there. And so many of us are so burned out from this cultural inheritance that says that we have to wrangle ourselves and everyone and everything around us into submission. And just a really important caveat, there's nothing wrong with goals and hard work and ambition. But, excuse me, if they're not generated from a place of being engaged with, and that is to say, surrendered to life itself. In other words, if they come from a place of striving toward an imagined future, rather than surrender and acceptance and like getting into the task at hand, whatever's happening now, they won't ultimately be satisfying. And nothing will. And the reason for that is so simple. And yet, we keep forgetting, life only exists here in the present moment. So surrender is about moving beyond the fear-based desires of the small ego self, which is that little voice, that thinking voice, that personal thinking. Moving beyond that ego self and into contact with that larger intelligence. There's like that inner GPS. And my assertion is that all inner work worth its salt is designed to point you toward that, towards your own self, your own sense of what's true. And that's why it's like, I don't want you to sign up with this course because you think I'm great or Susan's great. Sign up for this course because you want to interact with you. You want to get closer to you. Anyways, there's lots more to go into with surrender and what it is and it isn't. It brings up a lot of questions for many people. But suffice it to say for now that in Pillar 2, we practice surrendering the fear-based demands of the small ego self. We want to meet those with a lot of love and compassion and understanding. We don't want to live from them. We want to live from the love-based desires of the capital S self. This intelligence that breathes us and creates the weather and animates the universe. And it doesn't matter. We can call it life or God or spirit, or we can not name it at all. As Michael Singer says, if the natural unfolding process of life can create and take care of the entire universe, is it really reasonable for us to assume that nothing good will happen unless we force it to? It's a good question to consider. And again, there's some really cool science on surrender that Susan will share during the course. So that's Bright Line Healing 1, coming home. And these first two pillars, awareness and surrender, they really allow us to start to discern what it feels like to be at home with ourselves and with life, what it feels like when we're present. And we start to recognize too when we're not. We come up against roadblocks and things that keep us stuck and ways that we continue to identify with our small selves, like patterns of thinking that keep us out of presence. And none of this is a problem. In fact, it's a good and expected part of any healing process. So that leads us, though, to Bright Line Healing 2, which we've called Becoming Whole, which is about reclaiming wholeness and looking at what gets in the way of awareness and surrender. And that leads us to Pillar 3, which is forgiveness. And we go deeply into what forgiveness is and is not, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around forgiveness. I know I had a lot of misunderstanding. But for now, I want to just tell you that from the perspective of this course, forgiveness has nothing to do with being nice and everything to do with being free. We practice forgiveness because it's the only way to really unbind ourselves from the shackles of the past. And I love the quote from Lily Tomlin that forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past. I think that's right on target. It's not about forgetting or opening ourselves up for abuse or to be hurt again. It's really about acknowledging and voicing hurt from the past and taking our responsibility for our part in carrying it forward. And the beautiful thing is that forgiveness of others begets forgiveness of self and vice versa. And it's a gentle process. It's not one to be forced. So forgiveness sometimes happens fast and sometimes it takes time. And it happens naturally as we increase our capacity to be brave enough to see that our own unconsciousness has harmed other people. And that allows us to recognize our shared humanity. When we see that it's really just people acting from unconscious patterns. And it happens naturally when we recognize the cost of remaining a victim and allow ourselves to grieve and move through a forgiveness process with lots of support. So in Pillar 3, we offer a couple different processes to explore forgiveness. And aware that this brings up a lot for people, there's gentle guidance so that folks can discern the level of support they might need to work through in a way that's right for them. There's a proven connection between forgiveness and health. And Susan talks about that in her lecture for Pillar 3. But I want to tell you, this teacher I know says, life is designed to bring up what's been bound up so it can be freed up so that you can show up for life. And to my thinking, that's the crux of forgiveness work, to free up what's been bound up so that you can show up more fully for life. And that brings us full circle to Pillar 4, which is connection. And it's worth mentioning that this is a spiral path. There's no straight line in this kind of work. Awareness is inextricably linked to surrender, which is tied to forgiveness. And connection, Pillar 4, is about exploring that overlap, about looking at what ties all these concepts together, and also exploring new avenues of connecting to that capital S self. So in this pillar, we explore connection to the physical body. We look at the impact of trauma and the way that it can disconnect us from our bodies. We learn some basic nervous system regulation skills to establish a sense of safety and embodiment. And we look at resources, both inner resources and outer resources, that ground and anchor us in a sense of safety. Susan and I were talking a little bit about different ways that we've explored the inner work. And for me, in the past year or so, really exploring trauma and somatic work and how we store stuff in the body, regulating our nervous system, learning to self-soothe, all of that has been a large part of my exploration in my work with others and myself. So it's something I bring to the course, is what it means to come from a regulated nervous system. And we examine too what it means to connect with others while remaining connected to ourselves. And that's a place that people with addictive patterns tend to really struggle. How can I have deep connection to myself and what's true for me, and also connect with other people? So we work with positive boundaries. We work with clear and honest communication, really feeling from the inside out, again, what an honest yes and an honest no feels like. And we look at the cost and the benefit of seeking love, approval, and appreciation. Ultimately, though, connection with self is connection with life, and that includes connection with other people. So the aim of Pillar 4 is to connect deeply with a sense of your true self, that part of you that is beyond concepts and beyond comparison, that sense of self that isn't constantly being held up against that ghost image of a better, thinner, smarter, more improved version of you. In other words, it's connection to your true self, which needs no improvement. So why do this inner work? I think that that's an important question. And I realize it might sound kind of scary and hard as I lay out these pillars. And if you're really familiar with lots of inner work, it might sound like, oh, snooze, nothing new under the sun. And I think that the process of meeting ourselves, meeting the present moment, it can be scary and hard. It can be boring. It can be tedious. It can be exciting. It can be joyful. The foundational practice, as I mentioned earlier, is learning to hold this unconditional loving presence for whatever arises. It's about learning to stay when we've habitually run or escaped. And that can be so joyful and expansive, and it's not always comfortable. So people are often motivated to do inner work because they're in pain. They know that they need a new way of being in the world. And that's a perfectly good reason to come. Lots of people too just feel called. Like it seems to me like it's love that keeps us in it. Because once you taste this new way of being in the world, this way of present moment engagement, and like being connected to your own aliveness, you can't unknow it. So we do the inner work because we feel called to it, either by suffering or some other form of grace. And we keep doing it because it opens our eyes to a whole other world, a world in which we are awake, for better and for worse, when we're comfortable and when we're uncomfortable. It turns out that the inner work confers all sorts of benefits that are now being proven out by science. And I'm going to turn it over to Susan now to give you a sample of some of what the research is showing on these themes. It's always fun to hear how science is backing up what spirituality and what even just intuitively we may all know. But we all love to hear Susan's science. So Susan, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Molly. Yeah, I want to speak just really quickly to that notion that, you know, if you've done the work a bunch before, it might be like yawn, ho hum. And we've had people say that, like, really, I've done so much stuff. And all I want to say is, this is the third time we've offered Bright Line Healing, and I'm gonna do my best to do it. And I've done it the first 2 times too. I don't always, because of my schedule, I don't do it continuously the way I would if I weren't traveling all the time and juggling all the things I juggle. But every time I dip in, I am blown away by how much value I get out of the nuggets that I get out of. And of course, I know the whole course, but I keep doing it. It's like knowing that, you know, I know the 12 steps. I can recite them to you right this second off the top of my head, all 12 of them by heart. That doesn't mean that I don't get value out of reworking them. I do. And I am stunned by how deep the exercises we've come up with in Bright Line Healing take me. Stunned. Like, it's so, I mean, in the same way that, like, if you meditate, it's not like, oh yeah, I've meditated. Nah, I'm so over that, right? It's like, no, yeah, that's something you get more out of every time you sit, right? So anyway, yeah, I just wanted to speak to that a little bit because I think a lot of people are like, you know, yawn, and it's like, oh no, come with beginner's mind because there's so much here. So I want to talk a little bit about the science, and in the course, Bright Line Healing, I present science on each of the 4 pillars, and I'm just going to give you a little taste of what some of that is like, and then those of you who aren't going to sign up for the course will get to take away some really cool, this is all cutting edge stuff. Like some of the stuff I'm going to talk about in the second half of this little PowerPoint presentation I'm going to do. This stuff was just presented again at the IPPI, the International Positive Psychology Association conference, which just happened. I think it was up in Montreal. I wasn't there, but one of my colleagues was there, and she was messaging me through it. I'm like, oh my God, Steve Cole just presented on, you know, that stuff that you just shared in the webinar. So this is like really current stuff. And it's mind-blowing how much we're discovering scientifically about the effects, especially the physiological effects of doing the kind of work that we're talking about here, doing this inner work. It's amazing. So I can't wait to share this with you. So here we go. Of the inner work. Okay. So in the Bright Line Eating Bootcamp, which I know you may or may not have taken, and that's cool. But, you know, in the Bright Line Eating Bootcamp, our narrative is eat this way, follow this food plan, build these habits, and you'll get happy, thin, and free. And, you know, that's true. Like, for a foundational promise, I stand by that. But it's kind of true for starters. You know what I mean? Like, happy in particular and free in particular. Those are big topics, right? And also, like I was saying before, after you put down the food, things come up. And when things come up, many of us feel called in a way more sort of urgent way to do the inner work. And also, you know, if you don't personally do Bright Line Eating, I know there's a lot of people on this live stream right now who don't personally do Bright Line Eating. You may similarly come to a place in your life where you're feeling deeply, maybe even urgently called to do the inner work. And Molly just described how the inner work is characterized by 4 pillars: awareness, surrender, forgiveness, and connection. So it starts with awareness. And there's a lot of research on awareness. Like in particular, there's a lot of great research on meditation. There's research showing that meditation, for example, shifts neural activity from the right to the left prefrontal cortex, which might not sound like all that much until you learn that the right prefrontal cortex is habitually grumpy and upset and depressed, and the left prefrontal cortex is habitually happy and joyful and contented. And so shifting neural energy from the right to the left actually has some pretty big impacts. It actually makes us happier, literally happier from a neurological perspective. So there's all kinds of great research on meditation, and I do present that in the course on the pillar on awareness. But I want to even go beyond that, and I want to ask, what does awareness afford us? Awareness for what purpose? Awareness for what benefit? Molly talked about awareness as being just really simply developing some level of comfort or facility with being in the moment, like actually being present right here, right now for what's happening. And of course, we're not going to be there all the time. I think people who track it, I know I was talking with Marshall Goldsmith. I don't know if you know him. He's brilliant. He's the #1 executive coach in the world. Like, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars it costs to work with him, but the CEOs of Fortune 50 companies hire him. And he and I were talking, and he makes it a practice of tracking the percentage of his day that he was aware at the end of the night. And he's like, oh, if I give myself 10%, it's a good day. You know, like he's aiming for 10%. He's like, sometimes I'm 3, sometimes I'm 5, but like, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Like, it's not that easy to be aware for any significant chunk of the day. But when we are, I want to share some science around what opens up for us. And this research is the research of Barbara Fredrickson. It's not just research, actually. It's a new theory. Barbara Fredrickson's brilliant. I love her to bits. She's the professor of psychology and the director of the Positive Emotions and Psychophysiology Lab. She calls it the PEP Lab, PEP, at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She's one of the foundational professors in the positive psychology movement, and she studies positive emotions. That's what she studies. So she studies the effects on our cognition, on our physiology, on our relationships, on our memory, on all kinds of stuff. Of positive emotions, like when you make people laugh. Oh, look, it broadens their perceptual field. Like literally, they will see little dots in the periphery more accurately, more quickly, if they're in a happy mood. If you just made them laugh, if you just showed them an Eddie Murphy comedy skit, they will actually be better at identifying dots in the periphery. It's crazy. Like being happy, being in a positive mood broadens your visual field. Literally, it's crazy. So anyway, she's published so many papers on the effects of positive emotions, and she has proposed a new theory of love, an entirely new theory of love. And she wrote a book about it. It's one of my favorite books. Go grab it if you haven't read it. It's called Love 2.0. Love 2.0. And I'll just summarize it a little bit. One of the foundational things about her new theory of love is that it's not at all what we think it is. Now, this is a radical proposal. You might not agree with it, and that's fine. There's still something here, even if you don't agree that what I'm about to describe is love. But so the conventional perspective of love, the conventional perspective is that love is this magical, passionate thing, right? And it's sort of akin to sexual desire, infatuation, being soulmates, living happily ever after, but that it's also somehow equated with intimate relationships. So our sense of love is that it conveys that there's something exclusive going on. Like love is reserved for our inner circle. It's not just something you go throwing around everywhere. That love is a bond, that there's some kind of bond involved. So in that sense, there's something lasting about it, right? It conveys some sense of commitment or loyalty or fidelity. And there's something unconditional about it too, right? Like we love no matter what. There's something accepting or tolerant or forgiving, or like, you know, when everyone else lets you down, I'll still be there kind of sense, right? So this is the conventional idea of love. And so, you know, the idea is kind of like when you say, I love you, you might be saying a lot of things. You might be saying, I crave the time we spend together. You might be saying, I trust you and I intend to be loyal myself. You might be saying, this relationship is really important and special to me and you're in my inner circle. You might be saying all of the above. Barbara Fredrickson says, yeah, all that is kind of associated with love, but that's actually not love. Barbara Fredrickson says, love is an emotion, first of all. She said, let's get this clear. Love is an emotion, and it's the only positive emotion that must be shared. It's by definition a shared positive emotion. And what it is it's the micro moment of connection between two people. Like right here in the present moment, it's the connection. So think eye contact, think sparkly eyes, think that special smile, right? And it can happen anywhere with anyone. If you're open to it, it can happen with the checkout clerk at the grocery store, right? You can meet eyes, share a laugh, feel their humanity, and get like a really special hit off that moment. Like, wow, I see you, you see me. And what Barbara Fredrickson says is that there's three components to that thing in the moment. When we're present, we can drop in to what she calls love. Now, if you don't want to call it love, fine. Call it positivity resonance, which is another term for it. But it's a shared positive emotion in the present moment. So the first component of it is the shared positive emotion. Like both people's hearts lift. And you can measure positive emotion. Like it's a perfectly measurable scientific thing. Number two is biobehavioral synchrony. Biobehavioral synchrony is like, I'm going to get into it in a second here, but it's like, it's both your brains and your bodies sync up in that moment in very measurable ways. And then the third thing is mutual care. So let's imagine that you're in that grocery store experiencing a little moment, right, of positivity resonance with the checkout clerk, and a bomb hits the store. In that moment, you don't ditch each other. Like you grab their hand and get to safety together. Do you see that? It's mutual care. It's like it doesn't have to be forever, but in that moment, I'm invested in your well-being. Mutual care. Now, this notion of love challenges all kinds of preconceptions. So that I said the conventional perspective on love is that it's exclusive, that it's reserved for our inner circle. And Barbara Fredrickson says, no, not really. Opportunities for love exist everywhere. If we can drop into the present moment, they're right there, right? It could be with anyone, even with people we've just met. But there's reasons that I'll talk about in a second where it's way more likely to happen with people in our inner circle. We're not saying that we don't have an inner circle. Of course we have an inner circle. And with them, for very specific reasons, we're way more likely to experience love. Way more likely. But all that exclusive stuff, that's different. That actually means you're in my inner circle. It's not love. Love is in the moment with them. There's this sense of love is lasting, like love is a bond. Well, she's like, no, love isn't the bond. The bond is other stuff. It could be commitment. It could be, right, a marriage certificate. But she says love is actually, by definition, not lasting. Love is fleeting. Now, it's endlessly renewable. You can drop back into it again and again and again and now and now and now. But she says love is endlessly renewable, but it's not lasting. And what that means is that if you're too busy for the people in your life, you got to look at that because you're not experiencing the love. The love is only in the moment with them. So if you're blocked off from the present moment, you are biologically not going to experience the benefits of love that I'm about to describe. The benefits of love come only if you drop into the present moment and experience that love with the people around you, the people that you're claiming right now that you love. If you're not dropping into those experiences, it's hollow, and your body and your brain know it. Your body and your brain know it. Your body and your brain only respond to the actual alive love that's in the present moment. And then finally, that idea that love is unconditional, right? That I love you forever and well, that it's accepting and tolerant and forgiving. Barbara Fredrickson says, no, love actually has preconditions. It's not unconditional. You can't experience it anywhere, anytime with anyone. And so the preconditions of love are two, but the first one is safety. You have to feel safe. If we feel threatened or unsafe in any way in the present moment, then love is not a possibility for us in that moment. We close off. We close off if we feel unsafe. And this is where Bright Line Healing comes in, because if you try to access the present moment and you keep realizing, wait a second, I don't feel safe to go into the present moment, then it's like, oh, okay, then we work there, right? Then we work there. It's like, okay, there's some clouds blocking us from the sun. So people who experience a lot of anxiety, depression, loneliness, low self-esteem, those are hallmark things that keep us from dropping into the present moment. Then when you're in those states, you perceive threats more often than is warranted, and you keep yourself from dropping into the present moment, essentially. And love is not a possibility for you then. So because safety is one of the preconditions for love in the present moment, this is why we're more likely to experience love with the people in our inner circle, because we're more likely to feel safe with them. We're less likely to feel safe with a stranger we just met at the grocery store. Now, I can share that I've learned, probably through doing a lot of the inner work and maybe through some innate disposition, to feel safe a lot with strangers. So I experience love with strangers all the time because I show up with an open heart, willing to drop into the present moment with people all the time. But if you're less likely to do that, then you are going to experience love more likely and more often with people in your inner circle. And that's because you feel safe with them. The second precondition is connection. You have to actually be there connected in the present moment, right? It's not something that you get through Facebook. It's not something that you get through, well, I mean, in Bright Line Eating, we use Facebook in kind of a different way, but I'm talking about the conventional use of Facebook of like, hey, checking in at so-and-so restaurant, feeling happy, you know, take a nice selfie of yourself, like that kind of Facebook use. No, that's not connection. Connection is right here in the present moment, eyes sparkling, dropping in together. So we're talking temporal and sensory contact. So I said that I would explain more about what I mean by biobehavioral synchrony. It literally means that your brains sync up. So when two people are experiencing a moment of love together, a moment of positivity resonance, if you prefer, I don't care if you call it love, it doesn't matter. I think it's a radical notion to only call that present moment connection love. I think there's some benefits to doing that. It reminds us that we have to drop in, you know what I mean, to make that love real. But what happens when someone does, let's imagine that you're with someone and you have dropped into a state of love. When Molly and I get together, even on this live stream, we experience it together. We lock eyes and it's right there, right? What happens is our brains are syncing up. Literally, researchers, Yuri Hansen from Princeton has put people in fMRI scanners and had them sync up. And he's watched as their brains dance together. And when one person, the way he does this is he has one person tell a story and then he projects that into the other person's fMRI machine. And when he compares the person who's listening, if they're really connected in, their brain not only is dancing with the speaker, but their brain is anticipating even 1 or 2 seconds ahead of where that person's brain is going. They're so tuned in that their brain is dancing even just a second ahead. Like, I know this story. I know where you're going with this. It's really powerful. But biobehavioral synchrony is not just the brain, it's also the behavior. So go to a cafe sometime and watch 2 people who are experiencing love. You can see it. And one of the ways you see it is that their gestures are mirror images of each other. So they're both leaning in. They both are leaning on their elbow, just so. They smile at the same time. Like their gestures are mimicking each other, the tilt of their head, their posture, their facial expressions. It's eerie. Watch 2 people experiencing love. They sync up, both their brains and their bodies. And then their hormones do too. So it's the hormone that's involved here is oxytocin. And oxytocin signaling is this amazing thing. When we play with our babies, the first time this happens is when we love our babies and we're right there with them, eye to eye, playing peekaboo, tickling them, just loving them, just holding them. What's happening is we're syncing up their oxytocin signaling system. So oxytocin is called the cuddle hormone, and it became famous. It was discovered as something that surges during lactation. So a lot of people think of it as like the breastfeeding mom hormone, and it is. It also surges during sexual intercourse. It's the reason that having sexual intercourse with someone bonds you in a way that other forms of engagement doesn't. And it also, it's during, in childbirth. It surges during childbirth too. But more recent research has shown that it fluctuates during other types of things too, like laughing with a friend or completing a business deal with a business partner, like when you're signing the papers and shaking hands at the end. There's oxytocin syncing up happening there. So just even everyday interactions, if they're positive, if there's love in the mix, oxytocin is being released. Now, oxytocin is this powerful hormone that is related to social bonding and attachment. So when you have a finely tuned oxytocin system, it allows you to be more trusting, more trustworthy, and a better judge of whom you should trust, like more discerning. It's kind of crazy. You're also less likely to perceive threats in strangers, less likely to experience social anxiety, I would say. Less likely to see a harmless situation as being threatening. You know how some people they're just too scared socially? Well, oxytocin handles that. And you're more likely to perceive a positive social opportunity. You also become a better judge of people's feelings. You view people as being more attractive. Literally, people who have more sophisticated oxytocin signaling systems, they view people as being more attractive. Like the same person, they'll say, "Oh yeah, they're a 7, they're an 8." Whereas someone who has a not a great oxytocin signaling system, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, they're all right, they're a 5." Yeah, kind of interesting, right? Okay. So what's interesting is when you experience love more often, when you drop into the present moment, it tunes up your oxytocin signaling system. So you become a more sophisticated interactor with other people, right? Totally brilliant. Okay. And then the last biological effect of love that I want to talk about is that it increases vagal tone. So when we drop into the present moment and allow ourselves to share those micro moments of positivity resonance with people, of love with people, when we allow ourselves access to the present moment with other people, it sharpens and improves our vagal tone. So I want to tell you what that means. I want to tell you why you care. Vagal tone is the strength of your vagus nerve, okay? Your vagus nerve is your 10th cranial nerve. It runs from your brain down to your vital organs. So your heart, your lungs, your gut. It runs all kinds of other places too. It's a very powerful nerve. Now, research shows that actually it's more that it's the nerves running from those organs up to the brain. So 80% of the connections are going up to the brain, not down to the organs. So it's the heart telling the brain what's what. It's the gut telling the brain what's what. It's the lungs telling the brain what's what. So if your vagus nerve is not well tuned, your brain can't hear what your heart thinks. Your brain can't hear what your gut thinks. Now, you might now be thinking, well, that's a little woo-woo. I don't know if I care if my brain can hear what my gut thinks. Who cares what my intestines are saying? But you have a nervous system down in your intestines. The intestines are lined with nerve cells. I'm talking brain cells. We have as much dopamine and serotonin in our gut as we have in our brain. So your gut absolutely is thinking about things. And when we have a gut feeling about something, that's not just words, folks. That's your gut actually is processing data the same way your brain is. And your gut does have an opinion about things. And I'm telling you, as someone who lives her life following it, it leads good places when you can hear your gut talking. You want better vagal tone because you want your brain to hear what your gut thinks and to hear what your heart thinks about things. This is not woo-woo anymore. This is science. This is like real hardcore information processing happening in our brain and in our heart. So vagal tone can be measured basically by the difference in heart rate on our inhalation versus our exhalation. So let me explain why. If your brain knows what's going on in your heart and your brain knows what's going on in your lungs, then your brain can actually make a pretty wise choice, which is to chill out the heartbeats on the exhalations. Why would that make sense? Well, because you don't actually have any fresh oxygen coming in when you're blowing out air, right? The oxygen's coming in when you breathe in. There's no fresh oxygen when you're breathing out. You're just breathing out carbon dioxide. So your heart doesn't really need to pump. There's no oxygenated blood to pump out on the exhalation. And if you think about this, think about how much you'd save in terms of wasted energy if your heart took a little rest on the exhalation versus the inhalation. If it beat hard on the inhalation and then rested for a second on the exhalation. That's exactly what a smart heart actually does. It beats fast on the inhalation and it beats slow on the exhalation. A dumb heart that doesn't have a strong vagal tone, that the brain like isn't aware of what's what, a dumb heart just keeps beating the same bump, 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 bump. Yeah, that's not smart. So vagal tone is actually correlated with all kinds of things. It's correlated with better relationships. It's correlated with longevity. It's correlated with happiness. It's correlated with all kinds of good stuff. Here's the thing. Dropping into the present moment to experience love improves your vagal tone. Now, that's cool in and of itself, but what's cooler is that vagal tone also governs all of the muscles that make you a good friend, good lover, good communicator, good parent, good supporter. I'm talking about the muscles that control your face to make the right emotions of compassion when someone's sharing that their dad just died. I was just now with a friend whose dad just died yesterday. His dad died yesterday. And I'm sitting with him just now, 2 hours ago. And I'm telling you, it matters what my face looks like as he's telling me this. Because I'm not talking, he's talking. The only communication vehicle I have to share with him how much I'm with him and how much I love him and how much I care is the muscles in my face. That's what I got. He needs to see from the little muscles around my eyes my compassion. And it's vagal tone that makes me a good facial communicator to the people who are looking at my face to see if I care. There's a reason, folks, that Molly feels like home to so many of us. I put her on stage at the first annual Brightline Eating Family Reunion, and she just spent time with people, took them through some guided meditations, took them through some exercises, and 300 people fell head over heels in love with her. Where can I get more of you, Molly? Do you have an email list? I want to, when you're there, I want to be there. Are you, 90% of the room signed up for the first Brightline Healing course. Almost everybody. I think that's unheard of. At a live event, 30% of the room signs up for whatever the course is offered. 90% of the room signed up. Why? Because Molly was on stage offering it. And I'm telling you, there's a difference in people who do the inner work and are good at accessing the present moment, who know how to show up for love in the present moment. It changes their brain and their bodies. It increases their vagal tone. It tunes up their oxytocin signaling system. It makes them more capable of this biobehavioral synchrony. And all the people around them benefit for the rest of their lives, because everybody feels seen and everybody feels heard and everybody feels listened to. Everybody feels understood. This is the way we become a good friend, a good daughter, a good mother, a good son, a good father, a good neighbor. It's by allowing ourselves to drop into the present moment and work on being present for love so that our brains can become smarter at being a good person. And the effects are an upward spiral, like one begets the other. As your vagal tone improves, you drop into love more readily, which improves your vagal tone. It goes around and around and around. It's an upward spiral. And it makes you more capable of showing up for future connections. It's powerful stuff. So the inner work starts with awareness, and then it culminates in connection, right? That's the fourth pillar, is connection. So I want to take you deep on that. I want to take you cellular on that. I want to talk for a second about your DNA and how what you're doing and the choices you're making right here today are going to impact you on the cellular level next month, next year, and beyond. Barbara Fredrickson collaborated on this work that I'm going to share with you right now. But Steve Cole also did this work. Now, Steve Cole is the professor of medicine as well as psychiatry and biobehavioral sciences at UCLA. All right. Now, Steve Cole and his colleagues and Barbara Fredrickson, they wondered, how does adversity affect the genome? Basically, what happens to us if we're not connected? If we're isolated? What if we're mired in anxiety, depression, or isolation? What happens then to our genes? Because we've known that stressors like these have all kinds of effects, like poor health and unhappiness and decreased longevity. And how psychologically healthy we are today tells us how physically healthy we're going to be tomorrow. But by what mechanism? Like, they wondered, are the genes involved in this? Is it just happening at the level of our immune system and whatever, or are there genes involved? So in order to talk about this, I just need to make sure you know what a gene does. So just to go back to Biology 101 for a second, what do genes do? Genes well, first of all, genes just live on our DNA, right? But they get copied out of our DNA and then they make proteins. That's what they do. Genes make proteins. When I ask a room full of people this, 1 in 100 people know that genes make proteins. Now, I don't mean protein like, oh, you're going to go build some muscle and become a bodybuilder. I mean protein as in like proteins that are the catalysts and the enzymes in the cells that actually make the reactions happen, that build your body, build your cells, that create your hormones, create your neurotransmitters. Like, the proteins are like the actually active things in the cells, right? So that's why genes can basically do everything, because proteins, essentially, they're the reactive and creative elements in the cell. So genes are on your DNA. And if they're not undergoing this process on this slide right here, it doesn't matter that you have the gene. Like, you could have a gene for obesity. I don't know if you know Ari Whitten. If you don't, at some point, go to Google Images and Google image him. Dude's cut, like, he's ripped. He's a bodybuilder, and he's super fit, right? Everywhere I go with Ari Whitten, I just spent like a week with him in San Diego, and women just fawn all over him because he's got these big biceps and this amazing chest and stuff. Ari Whitten has like 5 genes for obesity. He's had his DNA looked at, and he's got almost all of the genes that we've identified for obesity. He's got them all. How can that be? Dude's not obese. Well, if those genes are just lying dormant on his DNA, it doesn't matter that he's got them. If they're not undergoing transcription and translation, it doesn't matter that he has them. So a lot of current genetic science is about looking at what makes genes express themselves. That's what we're looking at. What makes genes express themselves, especially transcription. That's the beginning of it all. So I'm going to skip this slide here because it's a little confusing. But basically, I just want to talk about what they found. All right. So here's the study they did. Steve Cole and his colleagues found 14 older adults who differed significantly in their subjective reports of isolation. So we found 8 people who consistently reported social connectedness over 4 years. So they were surveyed over 4 years, and they repeatedly said, yeah, I feel great. I feel connected to my family. I feel connected to my friends. I've got as many people in my life as I want to have. I feel like I have plenty of stuff to do with people. I have deep, meaningful connections, plenty of them. They reported feeling connected repeatedly, always over 4 years. And then 6 people who reported the opposite. Over 4 years, they consistently reported social isolation. That's how they felt. It's subjective, but they felt socially isolated from people. Then Steve Cole and his colleagues scanned their DNA, their whole genome, all 23,000 genes. And then they used a heat plot to see the genes' fingerprints, like were those genes expressing or not? They did a brute force examination and they found 200 genes that showed clear systematic differences in gene expression between those people who said they were lonely and those people who said they were connected. So some of the genes were downregulated, they were not expressing as much as usual, and some of them were upregulated on average. I'm going to show you what this looks like. So each row here is a person, and each column is one of the genes, okay? So if you add up 131 and 78, it's like 200 genes roughly that differ. You see how they differ between the lonely and connected people, these genes, right? So red here is the genes that are expressing a lot, high expression, and black is in the middle, and green means low expression. They're being suppressed, okay? Which is all fine and good, but what are these genes, right? What do they do? That's what matters. So I'll tell you what they do. Let's look over here on the left side. These are the genes that are expressing a lot in the connected people and being suppressed in the lonely people. Overexpressing in the connected people, suppressed in the lonely people. These are the genes for your immune response. Things like the immunoglobulin G production. That's our most common antibody, right? The type 1 interferon arrival response. That regulates your immune system. In the connected people, upregulated. In the lonely people, downregulated. Crazy, right? And what about over here? The lonely people, these genes are expressing a lot, and in the connected people, these genes are suppressed on average. These are genes for inflammation, right? Which we know these days is correlated with heart disease, rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, all kinds of stuff, right? Now remember, it's subjective isolation, not objective isolation that predicts this. In other words, you guys, it's all related. It's all interrelated. The more we show up to do our inner work, the more aware and connected we become. The more we're able to drop into the present moment and experience love, the more we become available for connection to the people around us, more available for love right here, right now, more connected to others, ourselves, nature, the divine, the entire order of things. Literally, the healthier and happier we are. Biologically speaking, we get wired for connection and happiness and health. Cool. All right. Oh, nice. I love presenting. All right, Mal, do you want to just talk a little bit more about those 4 pillars? Just go a little bit deeper on that stuff for us. Yeah. Oh, you're muted though, sweetie.
They changed those settings. I'll get it someday. I want to talk a little bit more about the course. So I have a couple slides to share with everybody. Tell you guys a little more about what Bright Line Healing is. It's these 4 pillars that we touched on In some good detail here: awareness, surrender, forgiveness, and connection. So what it is, it's a comprehensive course to do the inner work using this 4-pillar framework. It complements any healing practice or spiritual path. You don't need to be a spiritual person or a God person or not a God person, or you can be religious, not religious. The way is wide here. And you also don't need to leave. Of course, I wouldn't suggest leaving your current practice or path. Brightline Healing is a really supportive community. We do lots of coaching and connecting. There's a lot of support to walk this path together. And the people who are drawn to this program are incredible, truly. They blow me away with their depth and their courage and their showing up. There tends to be a wide variety of experience. Some folks who have done, we tend to attract a lot of people who have done a lot of inner work. And then some folks who are brand new beginners, and everywhere in the middle. And it's a place where we make room. Everyone belongs. And it's really important to be clear about what it's not. So Brightline Healing is not therapy, and it's not a substitute for therapy, although it could be a complement to therapy. It's not designed to address deep trauma. So while the course is intended to be trauma sensitive and even trauma informed, I want to teach you some about trauma and the nervous system. If you have untreated trauma, if you have deep wounds that have not been addressed, this work can be triggering. So it's not that you can't sign up for the course, but if you know that's the case for you, I would sign up for some one-on-one coaching or therapy and get one-on-one support alongside doing the program, or start with the one-on-one work. It's also not a quick fix or a 5-step formula. We're here as friends and guides, people who have walked this path, who continue to walk this path, not as experts. You're the expert. So we point the way, and the path is yours alone. And I really trust your path. So we hold space for you to find your footing. So what's your commitment? Ideally, like in a perfect world, you spend about 30 to 60 minutes daily on this work. Now, we do walk you through developing an awareness practice, a daily awareness practice, whether that's meditation or just some kind of mindfulness practice. You may already be doing that. If you are, great. This is not 30 to 60 minutes in addition to that. But we ask that there's some time for like silence and space every day, and some time for active reflection where you're reading the day's lesson, and you're maybe doing some journaling or some just sitting with some questions. There's weeks that are more active than others, and it's entirely possible to get tremendous value from just spending a couple hours a week. So if weekends are what you have, and you have just a couple hours on a Saturday morning, that's great. Like Susan said, she's been through the course both times, and her schedule is about as full as anyone I know. And she does what she can, and has gotten a lot from doing what she can. So there's ideal, and then there's realistic. Of course, if you're working like 2 jobs and you're just stressed to the max, maybe you don't want to add another thing. The point is, the real commitment is to the daily practice of integration, because insight without integration is meaningless. It's just more information. And we are not suffering from a shortage of information. What we're often suffering from is a dearth of integration, of being willing to sit with and bring an insight into our own felt experience so that we can claim it as our own. That's the real work. Eckhart Tolle says, like, don't let your meditation practice get in the way of making your life a meditation practice. So it's really that daily, ongoing, present moment practice. And we give lots of support around that. So the course has been restructured. The first time we offered Brightline Healing, it was, in response to a lot of demand. People were really asking for it. And so we created this course. It was one program, and it was 12 weeks long, and it was just a huge amount of information. And we got such positive feedback, and I love that first group of folks. Some people came back and repeated a second time. But the feedback also was, oh my goodness, there's so much here. This is like the most comprehensive course I've ever taken, and it's too much. I can't take it all in. So we brought on Benjamin this past year to restructure the course. We broke it into 2 parts, and I'll introduce Benjamin to you in just a moment. Benjamin is a dear friend of mine and Susan's. He's really the only person I can think of that I would really want and trust with this role. He's the perfect person for it because Benjamin's background, along with having done a lot of his own work and continuing to be committed to his own inner work, his background is in writing and in teaching. So he was able to help me really clarify and streamline and create a course that was more digestible. So streamline, spacious, powerful. That was our intention, and I think we pulled that off. The culmination of Brightline Healing Part 1, like I said, it's 2 8-week programs. So there's Brightline Healing 1, and the culmination is a guided at-home day-long retreat. And people really, really loved this retreat. So much that they wanted a second retreat for Brightline Healing 2. We take a full day to integrate and practice as a community. And of course, it's optional, but it's wonderful. Set aside a day to mostly spend in silence, if possible. You know, some people have families. There's all kinds of, we'll get a lot of creative ways to structure your day. And then we check in throughout the day for some guided practice and some suggestions, again, on how to structure your time. But it's wonderful and it's optional. So here's our 4 pillars again: awareness, surrender, forgiveness, and connection. And we'll be telling you more about the nitty-gritty of the course. But what I want to do now is bring in Benjamin so that he can tell you a little bit about who he is and what he does. What he does basically is co-facilitate with me. Benjamin is our main supporter in the Facebook house. To people's coaching questions in Facebook and just helping me to manage the abundance of community that we have. So Benjamin, I'm going to give it to you, sweetie.
Great. Thanks, Molly. It's such an honor to be here. These women are 2 of my very dear friends. And some of the people that, we've been working this path, this inner work together for many years now. And I have such respect for them. And so it's such a blessing, really, just to be here with them. So I can tell you a little bit about my experience with the inner work and sort of my academic background and what my role was in restructuring this program. And then I'll pass it back to Susan to give you all the details. But I would say that my experience is very similar to Susan's and Molly's, which is, my experience with the inner work was really facilitated in the school of my own suffering. When I was 20 years old, I was a college student and I went through this traumatic experience. And as a result of that, I developed a really, really serious drinking problem, and the progression of that addiction in me was very, very fast. And eventually I found myself in 12-step recovery, and that led to a lot of other modalities of inner work. Some that Susan mentioned, traditional psychoanalysis or talk therapy, group therapy, trauma resolution therapy, and then other practices like meditation and yoga, Byron Katie's work. More recently, the work of Dr. Brene Brown out of the University of Houston on shame and vulnerability. And that's been going on for almost a decade now. I've been invested in that work. But that doesn't make me, if that's all that I brought at the table, Susan and Molly would handle this just fine. I think I was brought in mostly because of my professional background, which is as a writer and an editor and an educator. Just before I came to Bright Line Eating, I was working at the University of Arizona. I was teaching undergraduates in composition, rhetoric, literature, and writing. And, one of the things I love about literature is really that it really is the study of human behavior. To read and write is to attempt to synthesize the human experience and then render it in a way that feels authentic. And that's really by focusing on pathos and human emotion and the individual experience, and less a little bit about like pathology, less the kind of academic psychology, sociology, anthropology. But the thing that I love about it is that it's really similar to, I think my experience of the written word is really similar to the inner work. And one of the things I talk about in my classrooms with students is I'll either take a really successful piece of literature, or we'll be working on a student composition. And what I'll do is, the first thing that I ask them is to find the spine of the story. What is the story at its core? Is it a story about grief and loss? Is it a story about forgiveness? Is it a story about connection? And then what happens from there is it's really easy to isolate in a kind of successful piece of literature why everything is in the story, right? Why every character is in the story, why every narrative choice or turn of the plot is in the story, because they're all in service of this spine, right? And the same thing with teaching writing is to, once we've identified that spine, anything that's there in the story that isn't in service of that spine doesn't belong on the page. And in my experience, that's the inner work. Molly and Susan have talked about how Bright Line Healing is not a self-improvement program. And every time I work with people in this type of work, and I hear them say these things, and they say it all the time. They say, I'm just trying to be the best version of myself, or the better version of myself. I stop them and I say, this is not about becoming the best you, right? This is about becoming more you. And finding out what is the spine that is your story, and then taking all of these other narratives, this committee, the chatter, the thoughts, the compulsive behaviors, and taking them out, extracting the things that are no longer in service of you, of the story that is you. And so when Susan brought me on to work with Molly in restructuring, I went through the entire original course, and they said they wanted to break it up into 2 courses. And I went to Molly and I said, this is so great, but the thing that I think is lacking is that you don't have a spine here. There's no narrative arc. And so when we made the decision to split it up into the first course of the pillars of awareness and surrender, and the second course of forgiveness and connection, I said, there seem to be two logical spines to both of these courses. And the first one would be coming home to self, having an embodied experience of the present moment. And the second one would be becoming whole, aligning with our integrity so that we can function so we can experience ourselves as whole people in the world. And so then Molly and I spent about 4 months taking the original curriculum and stripping out sort of all of the key components, reorganizing it. And then I would say that the course ended up being about 85% new content. And the goal for this, Molly touched on this, was really to provide a experience that was fluid, that was consistent, and that naturally progressed, so that each of these lessons, each of Susan's webinars, each of the coaching calls was really moving in the direction of the spine of the course. And what that did in my experience, because I helped Molly and Susan facilitate the course this last round, both in Facebook, mostly as a main support to Molly, and then sort of as additional coaching support in the Facebook group, it provided a really manageable, concrete experience for people where any question that was provoked by one lesson, in my experience, was immediately followed up by the next lesson, was answered. So that it was like moving through a river, first we're on this rock, then we're on this rock, then we're on this rock. And then you get to the other side and you can look back and see, how did I make my way here? It has been an amazing, amazing experience. Such a blessing to be part of this group and this experience. And I hope to see many of you there. But I will pass it back. I believe Susan now is going to give us all the details on the course.
Thanks, Benjamin. And I just want to say I experienced this in the course. So I offer the course, of course, I offer the course. Like I provide some of the webinars, and I have been there instrumental as it's all been unfolding. I choose to take it each time too. Like whatever, I'm not just the president of the hair club, but I'm also a client, right? So, and what Benjamin says is really true. Like the course has a through line. That's another, I like the spine thing. And you really do feel yourself moving in a very clear way of like, oh, these skills build on each other, these assignments, these perspectives. It's really well done. Okay. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Except, hold on. I have to actually open the PowerPoint thingy. Give me a second here. There we go. All right, now let me share my screen. There we go. Quick, and then we're done. And we're going to do Q&A. So think about any questions that you have. We're happy to answer questions on the inner work. We're happy to address questions related to you and your experience. We're, of course, happy to answer questions on, like, is this course for me? Or, if we miss any details about the course. Anything you want to ask us, really. You can ask us questions about our own journeys if you want. We'll stay on for Q&A until the last question's asked and answered, and then we'll be done. So just hang tight for this invitation, and then we'll do the Q&A, which is typically really lovely. So we do have an invitation for you. We haven't made that opaque in any way, right? We're offering a course here. And as Molly and Benjamin have talked about, it's in 2 parts. So Brightline Healing 1 is coming home. Brightline Healing 2 becoming whole. And Brightline Healing 1 is going to be starting here really soon. And because I come from the food angle, I think of it as, you do this because all that stuff that comes up when you put down the food, the anxiety, fear, insecurity, struggles with the bright lines, guilt, shame, other people noticing your weight loss and freaking you out, trouble with forgiveness, difficulty letting go, over busyness, that's my biggest one, other addictions, challenging relationships, wounds from the past, sexuality, coming to see ourselves in our new, smaller bodies, challenges meditating and sitting with the present, unhelpful stories we tell ourselves, feeling small and less than, feeling big and pulled to something higher, but not sure how to get there. All that stuff will keep you from living happy, thin, and free forever, right? If you're doing Brightline eating. But also, even if using food to cope with life isn't your go-to behavior, if you're human, you may have noticed that it's not so easy to navigate. Anxiety, fear, insecurity, guilt, shame, trouble with forgiveness, difficulty, all that stuff, right? Right? And there is no shortcut. You won't find this out there. There are other paths, of course. There are other processes, but I believe that this one is tailor-made for you. We're your faculty, Molly, Susan, and Benjamin, and we're offering right now Brightline Healing. So it's 2 8-week courses. Brightline Healing 1 is on awareness and surrender for 8 weeks. So 4 weeks on awareness, then 4 weeks on surrender. Brightline Healing 2 is also 8 weeks, 4 weeks on forgiveness and 4 weeks on connection. And together, this all forms a step-by-step logical path with a spine, like Benjamin was talking about, a path with a spine to freedom from the inside out. Like a feeling of wholeness and contentedness in your skin in the present moment. Free from all that stuff that blocks you from that. The powerful curriculum for doing the inner work. There are lessons and exercise and activities provided throughout each week. So not every day of each week. We're talking Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And live stream webinars from me, so you can get your Susan Science fix, one for each pillar. Weekly 2-hour coaching calls with Molly. Online support community. Molly and Benjamin are in there. It is a very active, very connected community. And then the full day guided at-home retreat. The value of this is ridiculously high. Like a standard weekend workshop can cost several hundred to $1,000 or $2,000. I just sent Molly to do something, the Byron Katie something, 4 or 5 days, whatever, like $5,000. Like these things are not inexpensive, plus travel, plus lodging. This course would be the equivalent of multiple 3-day weekend workshops. Your financial investment for Brightline Healing 1 coming home is just $497. And if you want to break that down into monthly installments, you can do it for 3 $197 payments. Brightline Healing 2 becoming whole is also $497. So that adds up to about $1,000. If you want to do a package deal right now, we'll take $100 off that and you can have it for $897. That deal will not come back. That's it. It's gone after we start up Brightline Healing 1. So if you want to do the whole course, I recommend you do the package. And you can do it in installments if you want to. If you're already in our inner circle, if you're a Bright Lifer, if you're a Bright Healer, if you've done Brightline Healing itself before and you just want to retake the course, what you need to do, you do get a discount. What you need to do is go into your course portal. Go into the Bright Lifers portal. Go into the Bright Healers portal. Go into the Brightline Healing portal that from where you took the course before, and there'll be a banner at the top saying, hey, register for Brightline Healing, and click there. And that's how you get your discount. We have a couple of wonderful bonuses for those who sign up. The first one is a guided meditation bundle. Molly has recorded a bunch of really precious meditations that you can have access to start your awareness practice. People are always asking for more meditations from Molly, so we're including a bundle to get you started. And the second bonus is a journaling guidebook. This is advanced journaling for specific purposes. And even if you've been writing in a journal, using it as the primary tool for your inner work for decades and decades and decades, you will find so much value in this guidebook. I'm telling you, because that's me. It's so powerful. It's an introduction to different methods of journaling. Things like, how do you write to access your intuition? Or how do you write to heal? It's got several sections of writing for different inner work purposes. And there's different ways to journal for different purposes. Really powerful guidebook. Whether you're a beginner or a really seasoned writer, you will find something for you in this guidebook. It's amazing. The course begins this coming week, Wednesday, August 16th, with your first lesson from Molly. And a few days later, I'm going to present a webinar on the science of awareness. So we're going to giddy up. So if you want to register, this is your chance. And our commitment to you is we will bring everything we have in service of your growth. We will stretch you, but not break you. We're here to serve you, not to please you. We will create a sacred space for healing. We will hold a vision of your wholeness until you can hold it for yourself. And if you dedicate the time and show up wholeheartedly, you will experience a deep transformation. And we thought a lot about whether we could promise that, and we decided that we can. It is true. If you dedicate the time and show up wholeheartedly, it's just the way of things. It's part of the natural way. There's no way to do that and not experience a deep, profound transformation. And I'll tell you, I experienced a profound transformation from Bright Line Healing. Like I said, not even dedicating as much time as Molly was talking about. I dip in and get profound value, like amazing transformation out of the exercises of this course, even just the ones that I can do. It's amazing. So we invite you to join us. And I'm going to go ahead and make it possible for you just to click over on the right. You need to scroll down. It says Bright Line Healing 1 coming home. Scroll down where it says register now. You have to find the orange button that says register now, which means you need to scroll down. And so we'll give you that opportunity to register now. And we will go ahead Molly and Benjamin can come back and turn on their audio, and I'm going to go ahead and enable the chat thread again. A few people posted. Robin is in South Africa. Johnny is in Valencia, Spain. Amazing. Michal is from Israel. Just so cool. Marianne is from Oslo. Linda's from London, but London, Pennsylvania. Just like we've got Greece, New York in the house. Love it. Okay. Phyllis from Israel. Vivian from Ottawa. So go ahead and type into the box. See, here we go. It always happens, Molly. Brittany says, how can we find more of Molly? What's her website or social media? How do people find you, Molly?
Well, really in this course right now, this is the way to find me. I do have a website, but I've been really working. This has been my heart and soul for the last couple of years. So my website is mollyklarkin.com. You can check it out, but it hasn't been touched in a long time. But this is really the way right now to work with me. And I'm honored that you would ask. So, but you can stay tuned. If you go to that website and you want to reach out to me, you're welcome to do that.
Priscilla just signed up. Welcome to the course, Priscilla. Awesome. Bev wants to know the date of the all-day retreat. Is that set yet?
Yes. Benjamin is my brain.
Yep, just bringing it up here right now. So the Surrender Retreat will be on Saturday, October 14th.
Awesome.
And that's going to do a check-in time throughout the day. There are 3 times. We check in at 9 o'clock in the morning, at noon, and at 4, and that's Eastern time. And all of those check-ins are recorded. So if you aren't able to join us live for that experience, you can always host your own Surrender Retreat day using those recordings, either that following Sunday or anytime in the future after that.
Beautiful. And can you talk more about recording, like that everything's recorded and everything? Yeah.
That's right. I was just going to say that everything is recorded. All coaching calls are recorded. So you can listen to them at your leisure. And Mel, to answer your question, we give access to the course material for 6 months after the course ends. So you can listen to all the coaching calls and work through the lessons for 6 months after the program ends. There's also a question about when Bright Line Healing 2 starts. Benjamin, can you give the dates for that too? When I know.
I thought I was so prepared. Molly, if you can give me a second, I do have the date, and I will.
Great. Can you maybe let us know when Bright Line Healing 1 ends and then 2 begins and ends?
So it looks like the last date for, we'll do our final sort of celebration call for Bright Line Healing 1, sorry, I didn't know if I was muted, will be on October 16th. That's 2 days after the Surrender Retreat. And then we'll be kicking off Bright Line Healing 2 on November 1st. That is also a Wednesday.
And that'll go for another.
Yep, and that will end on the, let's see, I believe it is the 26th. I just want to make sure.
And that answers Deborah's question. There is a little break between the two parts, Deborah, so it's not 16 weeks straight. And Debbie, the coaching calls are in a group format. Amazingly, we almost always get to all the questions. So you get one-on-one coaching, but in the context of a group. So sometimes people use their names. Most people feel comfortable to do that. You can also do it anonymously. And then there's opportunities for coaching on Facebook.
Yeah. So Bev wants to know if we're offering this again. We will offer it again in the future. We don't have anything on the calendar specifically. I would guess a year from now would be a safe bet, or sometime in the next year. But so if you can do it now, do it now. But it's a course we're committed to offering in the future. We just don't know. We don't have any future dates on the calendar. So yeah. And several people are saying they're out of town, in and out here, and that's fine. I experience the assignments and the calls and everything. It really works fine to experience them at your convenience, like schedule them onto your calendar, and there's no rush. Like, you get the material and then you can do it when it works for you. It really works fine that way. Yeah.
So Nancy, to answer that, if you're going on vacation for 3 weeks, you can totally bring this with you and just keep up by reading the lessons and maybe not do much else. Like, if you already have a meditation practice that you bring with you, great. I mean, if you want to take 3 weeks totally off, that's okay. My suggestion might be to just keep up by reading the lessons and then decide if you want to, how much you want to engage when you get back. It's fine to take 3 weeks, but it's all online. So anywhere you have internet, you can engage.
Yeah, everyone always wants to know, Colleen, do you recommend this course before starting Bright Line Eating to get your mindset right first? I do not have a set recommendation about should you do the Bright Line Eating Bootcamp first or Bright Line Healing first. I think they're both perfectly acceptable first steps. But I do have an opinion about which one to do first under certain circumstances. If relationships, anxiety, inner angst in general is like your most burning problem, any kind of sort of inner disquiet or a feeling of a dysfunctional life in any kind of way, then Bright Line Healing is your better first step. If your weight and your food are your dominant concern, if your headspace is about what you've eaten or not eaten, whether you're on or off your plan, the diet that you've just started, whether or not you've exercised, how many calories you've just eaten, blah, 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 blah. If that's what's filling your head, then do the Bright Line Eating Bootcamp first. Because that will be the most targeted way to just get that stuff, get your food straight, basically. That's my answer, basically. If food and weight is your biggest issue, then do the bootcamp first. Otherwise, Bright Line Healing is a perfectly fine way to start. Like, it's a great entry into all this. For me, like, when I was overweight, I couldn't live in my body another minute fat. Like, I had to get that weight off because it felt so hellish to me to show up in a body that was obese. Like, I just couldn't do it. And the inner work was like, yeah, that's great, but like if I have to go to a job interview obese, like, I'm gonna just cry. You know what I mean? Like, I had to get the weight off for me. But other people have other ways of moving through the world and other things that are filling their head. So I just invite you to look at what's filling your head. Is it your food and your weight? Then do the bootcamp. Is it other stuff? Then Bright Line Healing.
Susan, there's a question too in the chat thread. It says, will the webinars be recorded to watch another time? I just want to be clear about this. We, for the first 2 incarnations of the course, tried to schedule the live webinars with Susan, and it just seemed to be another thing for people to try to manage, right? To sign up, to get there, to be for the live event. So what Susan actually did is she went and recorded the webinars in anticipation. And so we released those as one of the lessons of the course. So it'll be available for you on a certain day on the course schedule, and then you'll be able to watch it at your leisure. It just seemed to be the best way to cut down on some of the anxiety about whether or not people would be available for the live event.
Yeah, totally. And everything is recorded. Everything is recorded. Sprout at hamelhouse.com. They're 8 weeks. Each one is 8 weeks, so that's why you're confused. It starts August 16th, but Brightline Healing 1 is 8 weeks. And then there's a little break, and then the next one is 8 weeks. Lori just signed up, beyond grateful and excited. I'm so excited for you, Lori. And Linda, you can't sign up between today and the 16th. We're closing registration before that. But you will still get the $100 off for both programs. If you need to take an overnight to talk with a spouse or think about it or whatever, that's fine. So yeah.
And Mel, we use Facebook for the community support. There's a Facebook house, a private, closed, secret Facebook house. But all the lessons and the course material and the call recordings are on a website. They're on the Brightline Healing website.
I think we caught all the questions that have already been asked. Oh, Sheila wants to know again, Bright Lifers don't sign up on this thread. Bright Lifers go to the Bright Lifers site to sign up. Yeah. Ellen says, I'm just completing the 8-week boot camp. If I join Bright Lifers, will this course cost me more? Yes. Yeah, Bright Lifers get cheapest prices on everything. Yep. Mel says, thank you, very excited about this. Sheila says, I'm scared and I'm going to sign up. Scared is a good thing, I find. What do we say? Like, yeah, that's the universe shaking the truth out of you. Like, yeah, let's go. Yeah, totally. Yeah, awesome. Any other questions for us? I'm currently taking Your Brightline Mind and Ari's Energy Blueprint. Should I wait? Yeah, Susan, you should wait. That's a lot. Brightline Mind and Energy Blueprint. Those are 2 very information-packed courses. I would definitely wait and do Brightline Healing next year. Ellen says, how do I become a Bright Lifer? In your boot camp, Ellen, you're going to get to the last day experience. You're going to get to the end, and there's going to be a webinar that you watch from me, and I'm going to invite you to join Bright Lifers. What I would do, Ellen, is I would register for this course now, register for the package, the $897, and then just sit tight and wait till your boot camp completely ends. It'll be clear how to join Bright Lifers. It won't be ambiguous. And then go to the support center, right? Hopefully you know where that is, support.brightlineeating.com, support.brightlineeating.com, and submit a request for a refund for the Bright Lifer discount. We'll give you that discount after the fact. Don't worry about it right now, because I don't know exactly where you're at in your boot camp, and don't worry about it. Just sign up for this course. And then once you've signed up to be a Bright Lifer, just go to the support center and request a refund for the difference, basically. Ursula, much love back at you, baby. Back at you. Love, love, love. Susan says, ugh, I'm a Bright Lifer and I signed up from here. What did I miss? Go to support.brightlineeating.com and you're going to say, go, Susan, if you go to the Bright Lifer website, that's where you need to sign up. At the Bright Lifer website, there's a banner that says Brightline Healing. sign up for Brightline Healing. But you can go to the support center, support.brightlineeating.com, and just request a refund for the difference. Linda says, is there a limit to class size? There is, Linda. Actually, we have capped registration in the past and turned people away because we don't allow it to get too big. So we do limit the class size. The first time we offered Brightline Healing, we were floored by the response. Like, we just didn't anticipate that many people being interested. To be honest, it was me. Like, I was like, people want to lose weight. Like, I don't know if they want to, like, become whole. And it was like, oh yeah, they do. Oh yeah, they do. Yeah, not feeling comfortable in your skin is a lot worse than I remember. I forgot, like, yeah, it's really bad. So, yeah, so we got flooded with signups and we capped registration. So yes, there is a limit. So if you want your spot, I mean, yeah, you can wait a day or 2 or 3, but if you want to be sure to get a spot, sign up now because there's spots now, but we do cap registration.
And we do that because the course is pretty hands-on. Like, we do offer a lot of personal support. If you post a question in Facebook, you're going to get a response from Benjamin or me.
Carol says, if you're in the midst of your boot camp, do you still recommend to do both at the same time? If you sit quietly, Carol, you'll have your own answer to that. What I want you to ask yourself is, do I have bandwidth for another course? Like, if you're midway through your boot camp, you know what those modules require of you each week, and you know what your participation requires. I don't know what your life is like. I don't know how many kids you have. I don't know how intense your work is. I don't know. Maybe you're retired. Maybe you're like me and you're a mom of 3 little kids with a big, thriving online enterprise, and like, no, you shouldn't take this extra course, right? But it depends on what your life is like. So if you have time to sink in to either a daily morning practice, like Molly was talking about, 30 to 60 minutes to digest these lessons, or like a good chunk on the weekends, like a couple hours here and a couple hours there, if you've got that time, and also it's not just time, right? It's like psychic space. If you have to have the space to integrate a new thing, it could be great to take them at the same time. It could be fine. But if you're already feeling squeezed in your life for bandwidth and for attention and psychic energy, then no, wait and do Brightline Healing next year. Oh, Thalia. Oh.
Just a reminder too that Benjamin and I will be doing a Q&A on Monday evening. So that's if a question occurs to you between now and then, you can call in and we will do our best to answer it.
Lori, I'm going to read that because it's awesome. Personally, I feel Brightline Eating and Brightline Healing are both essential. Most of us arrive at Brightline Eating with so much self-loathing, which cannot be healed only through an eating program. For me, the timing of this course is a lifesaver. Did I mention I'm excited and beyond grateful? Lori, you're such a dear. And I know that you're preaching to the choir here. Like, the 3 of us couldn't agree more. Like, this is essential work. It really is. It's really the work, right? I mean, yeah.
Victoria, you don't have to be on Facebook. We do have a really beautiful Facebook community that you might want to consider just for like the purposes of this course. You could join, you don't have to put a picture up or your name. You could put a pretend name if you're not comfortable, just to take advantage of the group support. And if you don't want to, we have plenty of people who don't use Facebook and just get a lot from it.
No,
Leslie,
tremendous value from this course without the Facebook group. I don't participate in a Facebook group, and I mean, I dip in every now and then, but it's the assignments that are the meat of this course, really. Yeah.
And I just want to comment on Leslie, who says that, does this inner work philosophy correspond to his teaching? I mean, I love Richard Rohr. I can tell you that I'm familiar with him. And I think that he is all about, he's got a book called True Self, False Self. He's brilliant. And so I think you'll find, if you love Richard Rohr, I think you'll find a lot that you resonate with here. When does registration close? Beth wants to know.
Tuesday. End of the day, Tuesday. Margaret, I'm calculating time zone. I'm thinking about New Zealand. I lived in Sydney for a while, and I'm thinking, I do believe actually that the live components of the course, which are basically the live coaching calls, they are recorded. So you can listen to them at any time, but I do believe they will be first thing in the morning for you in New Zealand, and they will be awake hours. We've timed them so that they're awake hours for just about every population center in the English-speaking Western world, at least. There are awake hours for the United States, Canada, England, Australia, New Zealand. There are awake hours. I'm not sure about South Africa, but yeah. So you should be good.
And Joe, to answer your question, will I be able to connect with participants near where you live? I mean, that's really up to people. Sometimes people do find ways to connect through Facebook. You can find the folks like, hey, who's in San Francisco? But it's kind of on you to seek that out.
Yeah, we don't facilitate that. That's good information for them to have.
And Sprout at HamelHouse.com. Yeah, totally. If Europe for 3 weeks is fine. If you can do a little per day, you'll probably actually get through more than you expect. But even if you get through nothing during those 3 weeks, you'll be fine too. You'll come back and resume, and you'll be fine. The assignments will be right there. You'll have access to them for 6 months after the course ends. You'll be fine. I do that all the time in this course, and it's fine to take a chunk of time and go on vacation.
Or she could bring us along, and we could.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll see you in Oslo.
Yeah.
All right.
And Brittany, I just want to say, I'm so glad you enjoyed that about this really being about becoming more of the self. You know, Molly always says capital S self, not sort of the better, improved, shinier version of you. I think that really speaks to, I would say, all three of our approaches. You know, Susan talked about being resistant to the idea of this not being a self-improvement program, but I've got to say that of most of the people I know, I think Susan has a real strong grasp on who she is, you know, and how to stay in alignment with her integrity, and to not look outside for that sort of for an external kind of compass or barometer, and that really comes from aligning with who we are, you know, and learning that all of this resentment and fear and the narratives that we spin in our head about everything that's wrong with us in our lives, they're not us, you know, that detaching from this idea that we are our thoughts. So if you're into that idea, I would say a backbone sort of the approach of this work.
I just had a really profound awareness, like little epiphany as I was thinking about all that. Thank you, Benjamin, first of all. Really, like, high compliment from you, just saying. I think my resistance to that notion just comes from my ambitious nature, right? Like, I'm really achievement oriented in general. And achievement orientation, by the way, is a personality trait. Like, there's people who are high and people who are low and achievement oriented. My dad could care less, really. He spent his whole life as a cab driver. He was fine with that, you know, and he's really happy now not to do much. He just, you know, stays home, and he's low in achievement orientation. I'm really high in achievement orientation. But my awareness was that actually a long time ago, I let go of the notion of trying to be a better me and really started accepting an approach where when I drop in to see where I'm at, I'm really fine if I find myself hurting and broken or flawed and messing up or not taking as good care of myself as I should or whatever. Like, I'm cool with that. I'm just happy to check in and be like, okay, here's where I'm at. So I think I have a hesitation to drop all ambition in my life. Like, but I want to do a pull-up, you know, and I want to like climb this mountain, and I want to like, you know, get 1 million people living in a right-sized body by 2040, you know. But actually, I'm not trying to make myself better. Actually, I'm just trying to check in with myself more and just be with myself. It's interesting. I think I did drop the self-improvement a long time ago.
And I think ambition, and I think it's a mistaken idea that ambition and surrender are at odds somehow. Like, I think you're living proof of that, like so much surrender in the way that you run your business and your life with huge ambition.
Right.
And it clears, like I said, it just clears the channel so that the true parts of that ambition, the parts that are really in alignment, can come through you creatively. I see it happen all the time in you.
Really...
Anyways, get excited about these things.
We do. We geek out on stuff.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
There's this question by Julie about being reluctant at the idea of trying to practice meditation. And I love the way this is phrased. How do you guide that? Like, is it a nirvana kind of thing? You know, we spend, I think, the first 3 or 4 lessons talking about this thing that we've mentioned several times, which is a daily awareness practice that consists of some sort of stillness practice, which we refer to as meditation, and then some form of active reflection, such as journaling, or working with a buddy or a mastermind group. If you're involved with Bright Line Eating, you'll be familiar with those terms. But I do think it's important to say that both Molly and my approach in terms of meditation, this course, is that the way is very, very wide. You know, meditation, again, just as we're saying that there's not sort of a best version of you, of me, there's not a best version of me, there's not like a best way to meditate. You know, there is, in my experience, the way that I meditate, you know, that was my journey to developing a pretty serious meditation practice that I've had for probably the last 6 years. You know, I meditate for about 20 minutes in the morning. And for me, it involves putting a chair in front of this window that's behind me and looking outside, you know, for 15 to 20 minutes. And I do some breath work. I count my breath. But we are not sort of attached to any idea of what meditation is. And in those first several lessons, we give you options. You know, we try to sort of brainstorm ideas for you to try on, you know, and see if they're a fit. And then if they are, you know, you proceed with our blessing. If they're not, proceed with our blessing. We have no, we are not interested in instructing you in the right way to do this stuff, you know, this inner work, meditation being one of those practices. We're really invested in walking with you as you find your own way to do this.
Yeah.
And just to speak to that concretely also, Julie, like, we do give a lot of guided practices. So if you're brand new to this idea of meditation, more than a few people use those practices every day, those guided practices. And that's a really nice entry. So we give you lots of entry points, like Benjamin said.
Yeah. And Nancy has a question that's right in that line. So I signed up. Do I need to order that meditation bench? So I talk about a meditation bench a lot because it's saved my derriere, kind of literally. And I use a meditation bench because I found that crossing my legs hurt my knees and my ankles really, really badly, and I couldn't sit still and I couldn't concentrate. I found that sitting in a chair, I always would lean back and fall asleep because I was exhausted, and twins and yada, yada. So for me, the meditation bench solved both of those issues. It solved my postural issue and it solved my falling asleep and my meditation issue. If you've tried other physical ways to configure your body while you're meditating and found yourself going, this isn't working for me, this isn't working for me, then I would say try a meditation bench. It was a lifesaver for me. But really, a chair is fine to sit in, or if you like to lie down on your back, or if you want to go for a walk, or there's lots of other ways. If you have a cushion and you're liking it, there certainly is nothing magical about a meditation bench if you have some other method that like you're liking. So I hope that answers your question. It's totally optional. But it can be a good solution if you're having any of the issues that I described. If you've tried other postural solutions and haven't found any way to be comfortable, a meditation bench can be an unusually comfortable method, especially if your hips aren't super flexible for sitting in lotus position on a Zappo or whatever they're called.
But even the prettiest meditation bench will not do your practice for you. Sadly.
Okay.
Lori says that she has a whole cast of housewives of New York chattering in her head daily. Does the course address ways to get rid of them? That's a great question.
Totally. First, you offer.
You know what? We don't talk about getting rid of them. We talk about making friends with them. And amazingly, and to my continuing, ongoing astonishment, making friends with, like making peace with, moving toward the parts of myself that I want to get rid of, and there's still parts, actually is what ultimately settles them down. So we talk a lot about that in the course. So we will definitely work with your housewives. They're invited to the course, but we won't be trying to get rid of them, because my experience is that just makes them louder and bossier and more obnoxious.
Yeah, you make them tea. You shake their hands. You ask them how they're feeling.
Have a seat. We're going to be here for a while.
And then it's like, oh, you again. Sometimes you can get, like, thanks for sharing. I'm not listening to you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. This is something we talk about all the time. I always think of the really wonderful sort of Liz Gilbert way of thinking about it. In her book, Big Magic, she talks about that she talks about it as fear, right? And that we don't get rid of fear, and if we're sort of on a road trip of life, there's no use trying to get, to leave fear at the curb. It's not possible. So we invite it along for the ride, but we say, you sit in back, like you do not touch the steering wheel and you do not get to touch the radio. You get to come along for the ride, but in a right-sized capacity, because all of that emotional experience, Molly talked about it too. I mean, there's a reason, right, why we assess situations and then operate. I mean, fear has a very healthy kind of role. So does anger. So does grief, So we're not about getting rid of this stuff. We're just about, finding a way to invite it along for the ride in a right-sized capacity.
All right, Mel. Mel wants to know. She said, Susan, I know you said to sit with it to see if we have the psychic space, but can you speak a bit more about doing both the boot camp and Bright Line Healing? I asked because it seems like they complement each other so well, so I'm tempted to do them both. I'm on day 22 of doing Bright Line Healing on my own. Okay. First of all, Mel, if you're on day 22 of doing Bright Line Eating on your own, you need to get into the boot camp ASAP, because you're forming habits right now and you need to make sure you form them right. And that's what the boot camp is. So get into the boot camp ASAP. The way you do that right this second is eating.com and you click on get started, sign up for the 14-day challenge, and boom, you should get to upgrade right into the boot camp. Now, whether I recommend you doing Bright Line Healing on top of that, I want you to type into the chat box for me what else you've got going on in your life right now. Tell me about, do you have kids in the house that you're trying to raise? Do you have a job, or are you retired? Are you married? What kind of other demands on your time do you have? Do you have any other courses you're taking right now? Are you in school? How many hours a week do you work? Because that's what it's all about. Like they complement each other well, but there's finite hours in the day, and there's demands on our time and space. Right now, unusually, I have time. then yeah, sign up for both. But don't not do the boot camp. You need to do the boot camp. If you're on day 22 of doing Bright Line Eating, I want you in the boot camp. So yeah, do them both then. If you have time, it's all about that. If you have time, there's nothing wrong or bad about doing both of those courses together. They completely complement each other, but you need to have a lot of time to do them both. So if you do, then great. Then welcome to a really intense few months of profound transformation. Like, oh my God, you're about to be rocketed into the fourth dimension. Totally. Cool. Leslie says, I'd like to digest this and possibly sign up tomorrow or Monday. Where can I sign up after this webinar ends? So watch your emails from us, Leslie, because you'll be getting emails to replay links and to, I think what's going to happen is our tech team is going to load up the replays onto a page, website that also has a button to register for the course. So watch your emails. That's the best way. I mean, one thing you could do is just click on the register now button, and that'll open a browser window where you could register and just leave that page open on your computer for a couple of days. That's one way to do it. You'll just have the order form right there. And as soon as you feel like filling it out, fill it out. But the other way is just to watch your email, because we'll be sending you emails, you know, and like, I think 3 on Tuesday or something obnoxious. We'll be sending you emails like, don't forget to register. So just watch your email. Yeah.
And we do have 2 more events. Susan, do we want to
Yeah. So tomorrow, Sunday, we'll be doing a Facebook Live, which is going to be totally fun. It's in the evening, 7:45 Eastern time. To catch that live with us, me, Molly, and Benjamin. And oh my gosh, Molly and Benjamin, I haven't even told you this. I sketched out what we're going to be doing on that Facebook Live. I came up with some cool questions that each of us are going to answer related to our own inner work. So we can just illustrate, like, yeah, right? It's going to be like the new Newlywed Game. Like, how does your inner work interact with you on blah, blah, blah. Boop, and I'm going to hand you the microphone. So anyway, we're going to have like a videographer. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a blast. Anyway, so you go to the Bright Line Eating Facebook page. Essentially, go to Facebook and then type in Bright Line Eating, the main Bright Line Eating Facebook page that's got, you know, whatever, 70, whatever thousand likes. You want to be on that page tomorrow night at 7:45. And then Monday night, Molly and Benjamin are doing a Q&A. So if you have more questions about the inner work, and this would be a chance to, like, if you're not going to sign up for the course, but you want to pick their brains a little bit, that's totally cool. Like, you know, no harm, no foul. Like, they're going to be there for your benefit.
And that'll be an opportunity. That'll be a call. You call in, so we can actually talk, unlike this format.
Yeah. So for example, let's imagine you have trauma in your past, and like that slide where Molly said, if you have trauma, this isn't for you or whatever, and you want to like ask more about that. Like if you're trying to wonder, well, I feel like this will help, but do I really need therapy in addition? That's kind of a fine line. If you're like, well, I've worked on it some in the past, I think I'll be okay. If you want Molly or Benjamin's take on that, that would be a question, or, you know, whatever your question is. Julie says, okay, so let's say I sign up and I don't dig the course. Yeah, get a refund. What is it like? There's a refund period, 30 days?
30 days, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so try out the first few weeks of assignments. And if you're like, yeah, I'm not digging this, get a refund, full refund. Cool. I think we're good. I think we should end. We've been here for like 2 hours and 45 minutes, and there's some poor person who's like, I don't want to hang up on them, but like this is getting long. Yeah. So if you have additional questions, just bring them to Molly and Benjamin on Monday night. And you can join us for the Facebook Live. You can type in questions there too. That's going to be super fun, I promise you. Molly and Benjamin are now like, what questions have you written down, Susan? You're going to make us answer about our inner work journey? I'm not telling.
I know. I'd rather not know in advance.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I don't need to rehearse anything.
So your New York housewives don't get chattery?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. Yay, Sherry just signed up. Welcome, Sherry. Oh, you're going to love it. It's so good, you guys. Okay. Thanks for spending this time with us. Thanks, Benjamin. Thanks, Molly. Thanks, everyone out there. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.